Hello, it's great to be back. As always, I'm joined in the studio by Alice O'Leary, one of our newsroom reporters. Hi, Alice. How are you keeping?
Hi, Charlie.
It's good to see you here. And it's, as always, the world of tech never sits still. It's busy, busy, busy. Give us a line on what's happening.
There's a bit of fight brewing, shall we say, Charlie, between Apple and OpenAI. So basically, last month, Apple filed a lawsuit claiming OpenAI had stolen hardware design. So pretty big claim. And it also alleged that more than, I think, 400 employees from Apple now work for OpenAI. So there's a lot of back and forth. And there's kind of a recent line now where OpenAI has published emails and iMessages saying it contradicts Apple's account of the case. So I suppose it's something that's kind of interesting, because I thought that, and I think a lot of people kind of think that Apple and OpenAI were somewhat before on the same team, it seems like, but now that seems to be kind of all over under the water.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways it shows, there's no friends in the AI race. I mean, you're seeing these partnerships forming and yet everyone's sort of at war with each other as well, because obviously everyone wants to be top dog in this. And this is a really good example of that, because, I mean, OpenAI and Apple have a relationship. They have a partnership in terms of, ChatGPT being integrated into Siri. Apple's kind of stopped working so much on its own sort of AI efforts and are more leaning on OpenAI. So in some ways they joined together, and it seemed like a smart move on Apple because it was way behind, and suddenly it leans into OpenAI's expertise. Seems a smart move, but they're also, as I say, quite they're big rivals as well. And that is coming into play now. You've got, as you say, Apple have been incredibly aggressive in terms of this, of they're not messing around here. But likewise, OpenAI's response has also been very combative. They've just said, Apple was getting this wrong. Yeah. There's no messing here. It's like Apple has totally got the wrong end of the stick here. And I think between the whole sort of, you're saying this, they're saying that, is the element of they're huge rivals, and that OpenAI is getting more ambitious in terms of what it wants to do, which is in terms threatening the position that Apple has. For example, as we all know, OpenAI bought Johnny Ive, the famous designer from Apple. They bought his firm. He's working with them on a product. It's supposed to be from what I hear is sort of donut-shaped device that people will use potentially instead of their phones, etc. That is kind of coming to fruition. That's going to be coming out soon. So we're seeing much more rivalry as OpenAI starts kind of going, we want more action here. And I think Apple are a bit scared by that. That seems part of it. And obviously with that as well is there's no loyalty in terms of what employees are doing. They're being offered multi-million deals to switch partner left, right and centre.
Exactly.
So everyone is switching hands. So you're just seeing this really sort of big battle going on. It's kind of, I suppose it's more sort of quite pronounced compared to what we're seeing elsewhere. But we have seen this before when Meta were trying to steal everyone, offering billion-dollar, pay attractive deals to try and get people over. It's sort of an extension of that. But I mean, what we're seeing, that the hearing for Apple's case is scheduled for October the 1st. So that's going to be really interesting to see. Does it just end up being a sort of sniping kind of movement at each other? Yeah. Or is this going to become something really big that's going to threaten the impact of both of them? And will they be able to continue to work together is going to be a key thing that emerges from this.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to keep an eye on the developments and whether they make more comments kind of thrown at each other, Charlie. But,
yeah, it's definitely not friendly.
Exactly.
And it seemed very much they were good buddies at the start. But I mean, they're really very much not. Yeah. Now, someone who's rarely a good buddy to anyone is Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg, my favourite person in the universe. But he's come out arguing against allowing powerful AI to become concentrated in the hands of companies and governments. He's sort of, Meta has sort of differentiate itself from its rivals in numerous times by calling for more open AI models, not OpenAI, but OpenAI as in open, more open to everyone to use.
Yeah.
And it's doing that again. And that's really interesting because it comes as Meta's trying to get back in the game, as we talked about the last couple of weeks with reporting season happening. Meta got trounced by investors. They were really not very happy with its capex spend, that it's spending more and more on AI without any results being shown. So it's trying to differentiate itself once again by doing this. It also comes as it's just brought out its So a new AI model called Muse Glimmer, which is a distilled version of the company's Muse Spark model, and it's designed basically for use by consumers at home. So that's kind of interesting because no one seems to be using it from what I can see. It doesn't seem to have got picked up in the way that, ChatGPT has, or Gemini or Claude. People are wary of using it. And I think this is Meta trying to differentiate themselves once again and kind of going, look, hey, we're the good guys here, which is always hard to believe, right?
And Zuckerberg couldn't have made this clearer. Like, he said that in a statement, he said that US policy must reduce the friction if we want American open source models to lead over time. So he, as you say, he's really pushing for this and wanting, I suppose, Meta to become a proper player in this. But there's a lot of rivals that are out there. He wants that to be more open. So it's an interesting one. I wonder, and as I say, as it comes across as the new model as well. So we'll see how it develops. I don't know if will his calls be met will it fall on deaf ears, or will there be kind of, I wonder, more developments in that space to make it more open?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that they're seen, Meta is seen as being sort of behind in terms of, it's not at the forefront in terms of this, and it needs to do more to kind of make it seem as though it's got a stance, make it seem as though it's got something of value. This sort of throwing his weight around in terms of, we're more open than everyone else. I'm not sure anyone's going to buy that, because, if there's any company that's more kind of like, we're going to close down on this, it is Meta. But hey, you never know. And, the key thing is not whether we believe it, but whether investors are going to buy it or not.
Exactly. And I suppose there's more tech results, obviously, Charlie, that we're kind of season that we're in at the moment. And again, I feel like we're shifting from the more traditional tech firms to the AI giants as it kind of the weeks go on. So SpaceX posted their first financial report as a public company since its IPO. Investors didn't seem too pleased right off the back of it. The shares fell by over 12% in the opening minutes after the results were out. So in the second quarter, Elon Musk's company, which as we know is kind of a merge of satellite space, this AI conglomerate, they generated $7.8 billion in revenue and reported a net loss of $541 million. And it also comes as well, I suppose the second part of that is news that one of its rockets is believed to have crashed into the moon, so that probably swayed investors as well. There was always
unfortunate timing, to say the least.
Unfortunate timing, and I suppose there was always kind of skepticism about SpaceX in general, specifically how it would perform after its IPO. But this, I suppose, it didn't fare too well with investors after these results.
No, but the interesting thing is, investors maybe are we're not sure about this, and again, it's based on it's capex spend, how much they're going to spend, particularly on AI in the next while, is the thing that seems to have kind of frightened investors, as it has done with Meta, as it has done particularly, with a number of companies we saw. Alphabet also hit with the same thing as well. Yeah. Investors might not be happy with SpaceX though, but the interesting thing is that analysts are, and the banks are still really bullish. We had reports that I did a piece last week, and Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, they were all, and a few others as well, were all coming out kind of going, we actually underestimated SpaceX. They're doing better than we expected. The revenue is coming in higher and more quickly than we thought it would, and we're very bullish on it. Which is really interesting. So you're seeing this real diversifying here, where you've got investors kind of going, we don't like this, we're afraid, we're backing away, and if anything, you've got the banks going in, kind of going, yeah, look, they're coming good. So I think SpaceX, because they do have these ridiculous things sometimes of we will put X amount of million people on the moon by, on Mars by X date, makes it hard to kind of really judge where they're at as a business. But I think all the results we've seen for the last while show that investors are still very much out on terms of where AI is at. We're all, there's still that thing of we're expecting big things from this, but we're not seeing the results, and more and more companies kind of going, we're just going to continue spending heavily. It's scaring the horses, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Brilliant. Now, we will be back in a minute. I'm going to be talking in a second to Francisco Geronimo of IDC, which is the research firm that focuses heavily on the tech sector. Francisco, in particular, is an expert in the space of smartphones. So I'm going to be talking to him about what's happening in the world of smartphones. We've had Samsung out with a new device. We have Google and Apple coming out with their devices soon. So Francisco's going to give us the rundown on what we can expect. This week on the Connected podcast, we are joined by Francisco Geronimo, who is the Vice President for Data and Analytics at IDC. It's a well-known research firm covering tech, and in particular, things like the sales for smartphones, PCs, all of that kind of stuff. Now, Francisco's role is he leads the research in these areas, and it's covering his beat covers smartphones, PCs, pretty much everything in that space. Am I right, Francisco?
Yeah, all consumer electronics, all the gadgets we use on a daily basis.
So all the tech toys that you all know and love. Now, and of course, part of our reason for talking to you, Francisco, is it's that time of the year where people are probably weighing up, kind of going, do I need, and I put need in quotation marks there, do I need, or should I say want, a new smartphone? Because, of course, Galaxy have just unveiled their new smartphone devices. You know, Samsung has just released their new Galaxy smartphones. We have Google Pixel lining up to bring out their new updates. And Apple, obviously, are going to be out early next month with their new smartphones. And we're expecting to see, among other things, a new foldable from Apple. So it's an interesting time to see what they're all coming up with. So we thought it was great to sit down and chat with Francisco to see what's the big thing in smartphones at the moment, and how are things like the memory chip crisis impacting. So I suppose let's start off with Samsung. They did the big unveil recently with the new Galaxy. What did they unveil there, and how does it stack up compared to what's already out there on the market?
Yeah, I think what Samsung unveiled a few weeks ago was quite interesting, because their biggest focus on the high end of the market, on the most expensive products they sell, has been basically on foldables. So they have been one, I wouldn't say the father of foldables, but they can easily be associated with the first brand bringing a mass market foldable product to all of us. And they launched, this is already the 8th iteration of that device. So they started about 7-8 years ago with the first foldable. And of course, the target and the main goal was to drive consumers to pay more. But for us to be willing to pay more, we need to get something different, something exciting.
Absolutely.
And what they have been doing is basically using the foldable, this new form factor, to entice us to pay more, so we can combine a smartphone with a tablet, because by unfolding the phone, you sort of get a tablet. And they have been doing it for several years. Other brands have also jumped into the game. Honor, Motorola, many different brands, Google, as you mentioned, many brands jumped into the new form factor. However, that specific device, or this category of devices, has been always very premium, always very expensive.
And very niche as well, obviously, because of the high price that you pay for it.
It's because of the high price, but more importantly, in the beginning, there were also concerns from end users and consumers in general about the benefits of using a foldable device. The first fold from Samsung was not the most attractive device, was quite bulky and heavy, and the screen on the outside was very very, very small. So there were always concerns. But over the last 2-3 years, we have seen foldables from other brands that basically look like normal smartphones, the same weight, the same size, and then you can unfold it and get a much bigger screen. And Samsung brought one similar device to the market last year. Very, very thin. When you unfold it, is very, very light. Great experience. This year they went a step further, which is basically to change the format. So the traditional foldables that we have today, or we had today in the market, were basically similar to the traditional smartphones and any iPhone or Android that you could unfold. Now they changed the format to this more like a passport kind of format. If you think about your passport, that's exactly the same form factor that you can have on a foldable today. And the purpose and the reason why they are pushing that new format is because they want to expand to different users. Many users never thought the bad experience from the current foldables was or the experience from the current foldables was great. If you wanted to watch a movie and then play some games, etc., was not great. So this new form factor gives you that better experience. And of course, they also have a second reason, which is related with the fact that Apple is expected to launch a foldable with the same form factor early in September. So that's why they really push hard to bring this new form factor. And again, the goal is to drive more consumers to pay a bit more, to have a different form factor, and to have a different experience, because the market, as you mentioned, is going through a very, very challenging times.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a minute, but I'm also conscious, even that sort of mid-price phones now are pretty decent, aren't they? Smartphones, so particularly from some of the sort of Chinese vendors that, obviously you can go top of the market, with the latest Pixel, with the latest Galaxy or, iPhone. But, mid-range phones tend to be decent enough, depending how, how important it is for you to go and have the most, up-to-date one. So they're losing a bit in terms of, not necessarily everyone wants to pay top whack for it. So I suppose with the foldable format, it's a new thing, the premium thing of like, it's a fashion thing as much as anything else, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why they have been pushing the foldables, because what the pressure Samsung was experiencing was basically the Chinese brands bringing premium specs, premium cameras, premium batteries, premium displays to a much lower price point. And that's why the likes of Samsung and Apple, particularly Samsung, were basically struggling to compete against those brands. Because if you get the same kind of quality, the same kind of features on a device that costs 30-40% less, of course, many users
It's a
would buy.
no-brainer. Yeah.
It's a no-brainer,
Yeah.
unless you really want to use a Samsung device. But they were basically being challenged by the Chinese brands. And of course, Apple continues to lead the premium market, because it's always perceived as a premium brand, and consumers want to buy an Apple product just because it's Apple.
Yeah.
And Samsung does not have that kind of awareness and premium value as much as Apple. So
Yeah.
they were differentiating through new form factors to drive the attention and drive sales among those users who are keen to pay. They can afford a device that costs 2,000 euros, but they want something different. They want something that is not just a traditional smartphone.
Interesting. So in terms of, to finish off on the foldables there, is it working? Is the approach that taken by Samsung, etc., working? Are people, are we seeing sales of foldables rising, and is that likely to continue? I'm assuming so, given that Apple are going to be in the market with their first foldable from next month onwards.
Definitely, it's working, but we need to be careful when we say it's working, because if I give you the numbers, it may sound, it's not relevant. So the sales of the foldable smartphone represent around 2% of the global smartphone sales.
So teeny number, yeah.
It means it's completely irrelevant. But what the foldables are doing is basically helping the brands growing in terms of value. The game is not anymore how many iPhones or many Samsung or many phones I sell now versus another brand. Is how much money can I make versus my competitors. So if I sell one foldable and give as much margin, as much profit as selling 10 or 100 any other of all other phones, it doesn't really matter. The volume game is over. What matters now for vendors is the value. How much value, how much they are doing in revenues. And from that perspective, foldables already account for 10% of the total smartphone value.
Wow.
And that's quite relevant, considering that we are talking about a price point that is close to 2,000 euros on average. So that's quite significant. And that's why brands like Samsung and others, and now Apple, are jumping into this category. If we look into just this year, we expect, because of the memory crisis, the smartphone market to decline 14%.
Wow.
But the foldable segment, we are forecasting the segment to grow 20%. So it's it's outperforming the market by several times.
That's incredible.
On the other hand, brands like Samsung and Apple, which have basically sold as many and captured as many premium as they could, they are seeing their sales slowing down, because people are keeping their device for much longer. You buy a premium phone today, you won't really need to upgrade in 3 or 4, even in 4 years' time, unless the battery dies. And now with the new EU legislation that that mandates manufacturers to provide the spare parts if a consumer wants to repair the device, longer support for operating systems, etc., etc. So consumers can use a device for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years with absolutely no issues. An iPhone today compared to an iPhone 3 years ago is not that much different. Maybe there's a different color. Maybe there's a different spal on the way the Apple designed the phone.
Yeah.
But in terms of the core features and components, they are very, very similar. So the only way for Apple and Samsung to really push the prices even higher is by bringing something new. That's where the foldables have worked quite well for Samsung, and we expect Apple to do extremely well because, as I said before, Apple is a premium, a fashion brand as well. And many consumers don't buy an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad just because they think they are the best product. It's something they want to show off. It's something they
Absolutely.
want to put on the table when they go out for dinner. And that's the kind of users Apple is expecting to attract. Those who spend already 1,500 on an iPhone or even more, but they will be willing to pay 2,500 euros because that's what we expect the new iPhone to cost, the foldable iPhone to cost when it's announced.
Yeah,
So we
that
are
makes
talking
sense.
about
Yeah.
a big jump. It's not going to be for everyone. We forecast Apple will only sell around 7 million units this year in terms of foldables, but that will put Apple in among the top 3 vendors straight away. And next year, we expect Apple to become the number 1 brand in foldable because they will drive that transition from the most premium iPhone they have today to even a more premium foldable iPhone.
That makes sense. And tell me then, I mean, at one end, we've got people who, money's no object, it seems, and they're prepared to pay for foldables, even if, as you say, they're costing, 2,000 euro a go. And then at the other end, there's people who are very price conscious and kind of going, well, do I need to upgrade now? Maybe not. I can hold on. This phone's still going to be good for a couple of years. How's that impacting sales? I mean, you've already talked about a sales decline with chip in terms of the memory chip crisis. I mean, are we going to see much more of the people holding on to their phone more? Are they going to be looking at how they acquire phones differently? I mean, I saw that Apple teamed up with Klarna recently in the US only at the moment to do plans where people are sort of pretty much subscribing to get a phone and then they hand it back in a couple of years. Are we going to see more options like that in the future?
Yeah, definitely. When we look into the most premium devices, the majority of consumers already buy on some sort of financing program or installment or contract with an operator, etc. So that is already happening. What we will see more and more is those kind of financial plan, to be offered to those consumers who cannot afford uh, a premium device, who only can afford 400 euros kind of smartphones or even less. And this crisis, the memory crisis, has been very, very challenging for those users who cannot afford an average smartphone, and they can only buy the low end or the most cheap smartphone they can find, because the percentage of the memory in the bill of materials is way higher. So let's say if a memory costs 20 euros or let's say 10 euros, and suddenly it costs 20, the percentage of the cost is way bigger on a phone that costs 100 euros.
Yeah.
It goes from 10% to 20. If you are talking about a phone that costs 1,000, well, an extra 10 euros is not a big issue. So those who cannot afford the most expensive devices will feel the pain, and that's why this crisis is asymmetric. Those markets and those countries where the average selling price is way lower than, let's say, Ireland or UK or the US, those markets are seeing declines in sales of 20-30%. The vendors that sell on average smartphones between 100 and 400 euros, they are seeing big drop in their sales because those consumers, their customers, are way more sensitive. If they sell a device, if they need to increase 100 euros on a smartphone, of course, for someone who cannot pay more than 300 euros, is a big increase.
Yeah. Yeah.
While Apple and Samsung are benefiting from this crisis because yes, they need to increase. Indeed, Apple recently increased the price of most products on average 25%, and sales continued performing extremely well because most consumers pay on an installment plan. So yes, instead of 30 euros, you need to pay 33 or 34. Well, okay, it's 1 or 2 less.
It's still manageable.
I will skip.
Yeah.
So it's not a big problem. If someone who can only afford a 200 euro smartphone, they now need to pay 300. It's a big ask for them.
Okay.
And that's why the low end of the market, and especially those products that cost below 150 euros, they will completely disappear. Those brands will not. They are stopping. They have stopped. They are stopping that in that segment and operating in that segment because it's not economically viable for them to make any money at that price point. So we need to get used to pay a lot more for PCs and phones and PlayStations and all those devices, at least for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
This crisis is not expected to become any better or to alleviate the pressure on the price in the next 2 years. And even after after 2028, we don't expect prices to come to the same level as we had a year ago. We will get less value for the same money we need to pay today.
Ouch. Thanks ever so much for joining us, Francisco. Much appreciated, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Now, great to chat with Francisco there. Some good insights there. Tell us, Alice, we've time for one last thing. What do you have for us this week?
An interesting one, Charlie. I think TikTok tested a new dating feature over the past week that put these singles into live group chats, but they've actually put it on pause. So I wonder, does that speak to a wider trend? But basically, there's a tool that lived in a section of the app, and I think it was available briefly in maybe US markets, called Hangout. So it invited users who wanted to flirt to join chat rooms with great and awesome people, according to different
It sounds compelling.
It does. But yeah, so it's available to a subset of users in the US and other markets, but it's now being paused. So a TikTok company spokesperson said that, some experiments might not be broadly released. So maybe it kind of, I'm sure, as Business Insider put it here, the experience felt like an uncanny hodgepodge of Tinder, Twitch, Clubhouse and Omegle. I wonder, does it speak to a kind of a wider trend of dating where it's obviously, we know digital dating is well and truly a thing.
Sure.
You've got all the different apps and whatnot.
Yeah, more people meet their partners through online dating now than they do in the workplace or through friends, which is obviously the traditional way that people used
Exactly. Back in the day.
In the day. Before my time, obviously.
Exactly. But now I feel like through this, it's just another example of it being kind of more and more centered towards social media. Even like apps is one thing, but now social media and kind of the live aspect. I'm all for, I suppose, testing new ways of dating and whatnot, and if it works, it works. But I don't know, the pause to me maybe sounds like maybe it wasn't actually super successful, but we never know. This is a small subset, but it's an interesting one.
I like the Business Insider, which is the US publication, which covers tech business, as you might expect, and many other things. Its headline was "TikTok's brief and raunchy experiment with a dating feature is over," and I particularly like the intro, which takes the Mickey out of that song, and it's like, "For a brief moment, we looked for love in a hopeless place."
It's very
TikTok, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is great. But it's interesting as well, that TikTok's trying to get into that space of like the dating world, because you're also seeing as well that dating apps, people have kind of got sick of the, swipe right, swipe left, thing. They've got fed up with this, it's unfulfilling. There's a space there potentially for, social media to get in there and kind of go, well, look, you live half your life on social media anyway. Why not go the rest of it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I love the way they try to market it, like, users can chill together and discuss on live. Now sometimes live is an awkward place to be, like whenever you're scrolling on TikTok or whenever I'm scrolling on TikTok and I come across really random people on live, it kind of gives you a bit of a jump scare. There's every kind of person on that, but as you say, they're obviously kind of trying to break into that market. They know that people are getting a bit sick of online dating apps. As they might work, they usually don't, and I think there's that kind of fatigue around them. So always open, I suppose, to new kind of ways of dating online, but it's an interesting development in
we'll wait and see. Maybe we'll all be meeting partners in on TikTok, Instagram, and what have you in the future. Okay, we'll watch and keep an eye out on that. Thanks ever so much as always, Alice, and we'll catch you again soon, everyone. Bye.